Well, you're very welcome. My name's Robert. If you have any questions, feel free. But some background on the park itself. Wexford County Council bought the property in the 1980s.
Right.
And the main reason they bought the land is that road out beyond. You can hear it there. It acts as a bypass for Wexford Town. Wexford County Council discovered that the busier the port got at Rosselair Harbour, the more heavy goods container vehicles were coming back in, causing traffic jams through the much narrow streets of Wexford. So Wexford County Council felt the need to buy up the property in order to complete the road network. And once the road was finished, they weren't exactly sure what they're going to do with the rest of the land. It's nearly 35 acres in total. But as you can see behind us, not typical landscape it actually built housing on. It's a little boggy and marshy here and there. So what they did back then is they got a committee of members together, have them throw forward a few ideas. And a couple of members realised that Wexford Town still doesn't today, it doesn't have its own museum space. In fact, the nearest museum we have to us is at Johnstown Castle, which is outside town, where there's a very interesting agricultural museum. So what they've done here, they've created this outdoor museum, so everything within the park is manufactured. None of it's original. So sites 1 to 6, still pretty much of prehistoric Ireland, but everything you do see is based on genuine archaeological evidence. So in as much as they can be, these structures, they're as accurate as can be, based on the evidence we have today.
Is this a form of stockfish where they ferment their dry out the fish, is it?
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going?
Will they enter inside?
Yeah,
We're going to do the guided
must
tour,
be the guided
yes.
tour, yeah.
So there's actually a clearing here, we see it. So this is what the first houses or habitats will look like here in Ireland. And they have a live fire going here.
My name's Robert. If you have any questions, feel free. But some background on the park. Wexford County Council bought the property. Here, deal with prehistoric Ireland, and we're going back in time here. We're going back nearly 10,000 years ago. Around 1975, archaeologists were excavating what's called a motte and bailey. This is a very early type of Norman fortification. That itself was built in 1185 AD by a man called John de Courcy, built on the banks of the River Bann up in Northern Ireland. What they did is they excavated the site, and what they did is they cleared a field nearby. As soon as they pulled back the earth, they found very distinctive patterns of post holes in the ground, with the remains of fire pits like this that were in fact well preserved within these structures. There was enough evidence left within these fire pits to actually send off to a lab. Specifically, it was hazelnut shell. They did radiocarbon date testing and discovered what they were looking at was very likely built around 9.5, somewhere between 9.5 and about 10,000 years ago. So these, even though they don't look like much, and I'll grant you they do need to be replaced, I suppose, sooner rather than later. But they represent the earliest built structures, as far as we're aware, discovered through archaeology, built by humans, set within the Irish landscape. Nothing older has been discovered, and the reason for this is there was a mini ice age throughout Northern Europe between about 10 and 15,000 years ago. So for a couple of thousand years at least, Ireland's more or less covered in ice. Very little of Ireland would have been habitable, certainly by humans anyway. But they found two distinctive patterns of post holes in the ground. One set were all angled inward, suggesting these beams of wood would actually meet at a point in the sky, which is why you have that basically TP shape, as you might describe it. The other one might describe it in the form of upturned basket. The piles of seashell, these represent this other idea in archaeology called a midden. M-I-D-D-E-N. It's basically a rubbish pit. Imagine a family sitting around the campfire. They're eating what they've caught, but the sort of bone, the shell, they're not going to try and digest that. They simply discard that to one side. Now, if it gets covered over, it might get very well preserved. Along comes the archaeologists many thousands of years later. They get very excited. They can pretty much determine exactly what they're surviving on based on the rubbish they left behind them. Any questions, guys?
Kelson, that is spelled down.
Welcome to site 2, a bit more impressive in comparison, much more sophisticated now as well. Often I'm asked about the height, how do you determine the height of these structures, and again that goes back to that post hole information, how wide the post will be, how deep it sits in the ground. It'll give you an estimate in terms of how high that beam of wood would have been realistically. We've jumped forward in time by about 2,000 years. We've jumped from 9.5.
So you have some statues here of what the settlers will look like. And you have what looks like it could be a bed up there.
Safe for much larger predators. Horseflies going around at the moment. Your domesticated animals might be migratory waterfowl, ducks, geese, that kind of thing, maybe even goats. But what you want to do is keep them safe from much larger predators. We believe wild boar existed in Ireland, but in fact we also had wolves. In fact, it's believed the last wild Irish wolf was killed in Mount Leinster in 1786, not too long ago in the grand scheme of things, so certainly 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. They were a lot more prevalent, especially at night time. So you bring your animals in at night time. You'll see a mezzanine built above that animal pen just inside. Most likely primarily used for storage, but it's also where the small children could have slept, especially during the bad winter months, because you get a secondary benefit of the animals indoors. You get the heat transfer off them. So if you look inside here, it's a bit more interesting than the previous picture.
And then inside now, as I previously, these are some mark statues of the inhabitants. They have upper level, up here. Quite content. You got some fur here, looks like, or like some ferns.
Yeah, it's mad that that's...
That's without the need for a fire within the building, because there would have been a fire lit within the building itself. Fire is very important. It serves three main purposes. One, it's a source of heat, especially during the bad winter months. And also it's a source of light, especially if it's fairly dark in there. No candles just yet, we believe. But also it's your source for cooking. So very important to have a fire lit almost all day, every day. In fact, we can't even determine what kind of gods they would have likely believed in either. But there's a good possibility of their farming, they're cutting down trees or planting crops. They're depending on the earth to sustain them. It's very possible they worship a form of earth god. We're in the middle of a typical god's season now called Lunacy, which is named after Lug or Lu, L-U-G-H, the god of the harvest. And traditionally it's known as the harvest season here in Ireland. It finishes up around the end of September or so. But in terms of our burial rites, we're going to look at a dolmen next.
Isn't Donegal somewhere? Crazy donkey garden.
That's right, the crazy donkey is gone.
So welcome to our dolmen. Now what's interesting is the word dolmen isn't an Irish word at all. It's an old Breton phrase, a region typically found in northern France. But we believe it roughly translates as stone table, which have our uprights, holding what's commonly referred to as a capstone in place. Now everything within the park, as I said, it's manufactured. Everything you do see is a reproduction. That includes this and the stone circle a little further on, the ring fort, the monastic enclosure we have. But everything is built heritage, but everything you do see is based on genuine archaeological evidence, so as much as they can be, they're as accurate as they can be. Now that capstone, the top stone on top, weighs about 8 tonne, and I've been told it took at least 3 days for modern machinery to get that into such a way such a pretty solid. We get kids coming in, they just had to climb this. We can't have a rock or worse silt collapse beneath them, so I have to be pretty solid. But one of the biggest capstones that we have, it's associated with Browns Hill Dolmen, found in County Carlow, and experts have determined that the capstone there weighs well in excess of 100 tonne. So just imagine the effort required to shift that in place 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. You might think also if it's a tomb, it's a very small chamber space, looking at it from here. But what they did back then is they burned their dead, they cremated their dead, which means the space that size can be used maybe 10, 15, even upwards of 20 times before it's actually considered full. Now you get 4 main types of what's considered megalithic structure, mega meaning big, lithic meaning rock, so big rock structure. This is the portal dolmen. You get one very similar called a court tomb. It would have another area at the front designated for holding court, whatever sort of religious practice might have been involved. There's a rare one called a wedge tomb, not very common in Ireland. They're a little lower to the ground, may in fact have 2 or 3 capstones placed on top. But the most famous one is the one we just mentioned earlier, Newgrange, the passage tomb. Newgrange experts have determined took at least 250 years to build from start to finish. Whatever group of people started that, and I've never got the chance to see it complete in their lifetime. But what's interesting about Newgrange's Roman coin was discovered at site. Now we do know the Romans didn't really conquer Ireland, didn't really conquer Scotland either. That's why Hadrian's Wall was built, and in fact a further wall further north still called the Antonine Wall. But Roman coins, certainly through trade between Britain and Ireland, very likely made its way into the Irish landscape and possibly made its way there as an offering or a token to the gods. The Romans did give us our name. They referred to us as Hibernia, the land of constant winter. Any questions, guys? Years ago, and what's commonly referred to as anaerobic conditions, anything organic that goes into a bog is very naturally well preserved. If you guys get a chance, if you're up around Dublin, go visit the National Museum. They got bog bodies on display up there. In fact, one of them so well preserved, you can still make out part of his tattoo. He's about 4,500 years old, this guy. CIST. And again, like the word dolmen, that's not an Irish word either. It's an old German word, which means box, and very often they're referred to as a box-type grave. If you can see just from this angle, there's a mock skeleton just inside. He's one of those educational classic skeletons you get in school. He's there mainly to show that there's in fact a shift in terms of their religious practice, and the main reason for the shift is we believe the Celts have arrived. As you can imagine, the Celts, when they come in, they bring their own religious leaders, often referred to as the Druids, and very likely these Druids, they had a profound effect on their funeral rites, so they stopped burning their dead now, they're placing the entire body in there. And what's interesting is archaeologists are discovering earthenware jars, or clay beakers if you like, that would have contained food or other objects to help them on their journey towards the afterlife. So it's a bit like within the park itself. What you're looking at represents the only circle anyway you will find in the entire county of Wexford. Apparently there was one marked on an early map going back to around 1710. By 1740 it was long gone. Every generation has a tendency to have their own influence on the landscape around them. Now for many hundreds of years people come along to these sites and take away that raw material to utilise it elsewhere. But generally a lot of these objects, they've been untouched as a result of superstition more than anything else. You've probably heard this idea of a farmer farming around a fairy fort, just in case he kind of, I suppose, brings the wrath of the fairies against him and his family, and that sort of bad luck is said to be generational as well. It goes on to your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, etc. What you have generally is a door facing this stone, and very often this stone facing the doorway, it's always offset in the horizontal just like this. Now most likely the door, it's in line with the sun. As you can imagine, as the year goes by, you'll find the sun is at a different point in the sky. That would cast a different shadow on this horizontal stone. So this very likely could have been marked at intervals, giving you a three-dimensional calendar set within the landscape. Now if you were to ask yourself why would they have a need for a calendar back in these days, the Celts, we believe, introduced this idea of cows or cattle as a form of currency. An awful lot of things were measured in how many cows it was worth. If you had a good sword, it could be worth 10 cows. A better sword is worth 12 or 15, but that means that when you sow your crops, you're not just depending on your harvest to sustain you and your family, but actually keep your livestock good and healthy, especially if they represent a form of currency. So what you want to do is determine what time of year it is to guarantee yourself a successful harvest the following season. I drew your attention to the cooking pit there, the following.
Arkham was made by the god Almagus. It's based on Latin alphabet. It means the inventors must have been able to read and write Latin, the language of the nearby Roman Empire, as well as representing the Latin letter for each Arkham character. Also represents the name of a different tree in Old Irish. See? So that's just the description here. You have various languages here. Arkham is in Ireland, somewhat 17,000 years. Found, I don't know where it is. It is based off the Latin alphabet, and it would be thought that for the dead and for the magic, ice cream invented, so to be used for other purposes. Three bits and pieces. So the Arkham script that goes up to the top. It's absolutely fantastic. And then I'm going to check out this here Celtic fort right beside me. I have to charge this phone unfortunately, but hopefully get all of it in today's video. So here we're coming to a settlement here. Usual there's faults here. Let's shake this one first. A Celtic sword here. Got some meat hanging. Dried out meat. Got some sausages here and tons of butter buckets. The reason, as I said before, this is so low. If an intruder comes in, he has to bow down, he or she has to bow down so you can hack your head off as they enter the room. And you'll be collared over here. Last year's wee house over here, it's got like a wee area up here for the fire. This is just a stable or a workshop area. So we got a little fire going here. So this is inside the hut here, so the fire's just down there as you can see. And this looks like it's more highly developed in comparison to the other one. That's about it. Really like it here, and it's pretty cool. I wish I found out about this sooner. So we're just going to look at these segments here. So it's just an overview of the little settlement. I have to admit, I'm very impressed. It's just a view there below. This is the watchtower. So this is pretty much it here. I'm going to go down. It's nice to be ivy here, everyone. See here? There's some here too. So ultimately that concludes this section. There's a few more Celtic structures, but I do see what happens now. We have a church here. A cross over here. We got a very intricately designed cross here. However, we're not going to get into that just yet. Just want to check this one out. There's a standing stone here.
During the 1980s, the remains of a small hermitage was discovered on the South Peak. It was a truly remarkable
attractive thing here.
Etched into the rock face, a third barely discernible and perilous stair leads to the highest point of the island. The monks built two woods to the South Peak. Like the rest, it was intense.
We're going to the factory here. Looks very Skyrim-esque. Monk cell. Left in wood here. So as they proclaim modestness is next to godliness, so you just now that's a photograph that. Abbot's house. This is the earlier seasons of Fallout Head pure production. That's a joke, by the way, in case you didn't catch that. I like how the design here, left hand side. But also, you have the Virgin Mary over here. Also a cookery area. So this is smoke here. Looks like a fisherman's trying to hide it. We drop down here. So this looks like a fisherman's hut. And you get charged with phone pricing. You have millstone here. We come to the end part of the Celtic part. It's divided two sections. It's divided to the Celtic part and the Viking part. Mine for gold pot here. Or a gold rush. See? That's pretty cool. Wooden caravan over here. Check out the entrance to the Viking site. That is awesome, that. Check out Celtic swirl there. Contemporary Irish and Celtic stuff, or Celtic and Viking stuff. Press, so we'll see here open air park, museum park, is bowling schools. There's some scriptures on the walls. In the beginning there was nothing, neither sand nor sea nor cooling surf. There was no earth, nor upper heaven, no blade or grass, only the great void. Odin is the highest and oldest of the gods. He governs all things, and however mighty and other gods have, be they and obey him as children do their father. I know that nobody really, because like we're reading such shit. How well the Vikings clashed, the ref leaves out the men's rules, raging we killed, and speared bodies sprawled sleepy at the town gates. We work on this area at the moment. There's no entry, so we're just going to peep inside. We're not going to go inside it. There's some Viking helmets. Some helmets here and table too. There's a fuller face one. This place can't go inside. It was meant to be. Looks like little shields.
Oh, boxes as well. Yeah, so there are boxes as well. It's nice to sit down. Just sat down for lunch.
Landscape.
Yeah, set.
So there were some chainmail too, so there and there were some helmet too, of the connecting nose part.
Those are... Is there anyone coming? There is, but they'll just have to miss me saying who I am. First and foremost, you're all very welcome to the Irish National Heritage Park this afternoon. My name is Dan. I'll be your tour guide on this now, our Age of Invasion tour we're going to be discussing here now. Age of Invasion, as it says in the brochures, makes it seem like there's only one single invasion that we're talking about on this tour. It's not. Realistically, there's about 15 or 16, probably more, different invasions that happen in Ireland during the time that we're covering here now. I only have about 45 to 50 minutes though on this tour, so instead it is 2 invasions that we'll be talking about. All the different times that the Vikings come into Ireland, because they don't just come in once. We're going to talk about that once at the next stop that we have over that way. And later on, if we're feeling up to it, we'll discuss the Normans coming into Ireland as well as we make our way on up towards the Falconry Centre. So before we move on, before we get the tour started, I'm going to shut these gates behind us here now. When we're all set then, we'll move on out this way towards our first stop, Site 13, our Viking boatyard, to discuss the Vikings. So if you want to follow me, go ahead this way. Is this someone's? Oh, chase. Yeah. And is that someone's? It's an ancient Viking chase.
Here now, the first part of the tour. First sort of we'll start with the invasions of the Vikings, the first one.
Vikings we're going to be talking about at this stop here. Now the first recorded Viking raid we have on this island, the first time the Vikings arrive here, that occurs during the 790s, and from this point onwards you get a pattern of seasonal raidings. You'll have Vikings coming into this island during the summer months when the weather is good, raiding across the lands, taking silver, gold, people, livestock as well. But they don't stay here. When the weather gets bad, when the winter hits, they would go back home to Scandinavia. They're not building any big permanent structures like what we have here then during this time. These kind of structures don't come along until the 820s and 830s, when all of a sudden, and no one's really fully sure why, we suddenly get much larger numbers of Vikings arriving in, larger than ever before seen. These guys have no intention of going home. These guys are coming in, they're raiding, and then they're staying. They're looking to make Ireland their new and permanent home by building big structures like what we have here. And again, no one really fully knows why this happens. There's loads of different theories today, but the most likely theory has it all down to an overpopulation crisis that occurs in Scandinavia during this time. To simplify what that is, during the early 800s, lots of Vikings are born. By the 820s and 830s, they've all grown up. They've all become moody teenagers, or worse again, moody young adults who all want land and opportunities for themselves. And there just isn't any land or opportunities for these guys in Scandinavia at this point. So a lot of them choose to leave. They emigrate in effect, sailing all across Northern Europe, looking for opportunities for themselves elsewhere. And they're going to go pretty much all over Northern Europe, into modern day Russia, the Baltic coast, into northern France, as we'll see later on up that way, and of course here into Ireland, settling down along the south and southeast coast, building small sites like what we have here. This would be just a one family shipyard camp that we have now. If a couple, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 families move together, they may build a slightly larger fortified version of this with a wall into what's called a long port. And on 5 occasions, 5 of these long ports grow in such large size, they become the first 5 towns that this island ever sees. The idea of a town in Ireland in 830s Ireland, that's not a thing. No one's gotten around to building that yet. When the Vikings arrive and they start building towns, those are the first 5 towns we ever see. All 5 of these towns still standing today. So to make this tour a bit more interactive and to save my voice later on when I have to do a lot of shouting, I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to ask my members of the audience to tell me, what do you think those 5 towns are? There are 2 of them that are pretty easy. 2 are relatively hard. We won't beat ourselves up if we don't get them. One of them is so easy, in fact, that if we don't get it, or if it's the last to be said, the tour is actually just going to stop here and you just can carry on about on your own. No pressure, basically. But any guesses, guys? You want to throw your hands up? Yes?
Wexford.
Wexford. Weissfjord, as they call it. Literally means West Fjord. Everyone will tell you it means muddy inlet fjord. It doesn't. Don't know where that comes from. It means West Fjord. West of what? Don't know, because can't get any more east than here, but that's the way it works. Yeah, Wexford. Most important one then. The tour is going to carry on. Yeah.
Dublin.
Dublin, Dyflin, another. Yeah. Were you going to say Dublin? You were going to say Dublin. Any other guesses?
Limerick.
Limerick is one. One of these is now the next few. One of them is literally the greatest city ever to be built on this earth.
Cork.
Cork, well done. Yeah, one more then.
Waterford.
Waterford, yeah. So Cork, Waterford, Wexford, Dublin, Limerick. Those are the first 5 towns we ever have on this island. Those are all Viking towns, and those towns grow and exist there because of what you see back there behind us, the rivers. They all are built at the mouths of fairly large rivers. That one being the Slaney, but Cork has the Lee, Dublin the Liffey, Limerick the Shannon, the longest river on this island. The Vikings don't just want to raid along the coast, they want to raid inland. They want to go into the centre of Ireland, or the island. This is the rivers they would use to get there. It makes sense then that most Vikings would come to live in these places. Now, for the next 200 or so years, a period we refer to as Viking era Ireland, it's very much the Vikings in control of this island. They're the most powerful and political force in all the land. That control only really coming to an end at the beginning of the 11th century. For loads of different reasons, obvious ones like military defeats, that's going to weaken them, the most notable being the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, during which the Vikings of Dublin are defeated. But also things going on in the background that may not seem so obvious, they're going to be a major reason for the end of Viking era Ireland, the most important one being the passing of time. Because by 1014, that's some 200 years since the Vikings have first arrived in this island, and they haven't just solely been keeping to themselves during all this time. They've been intermixing with all of the local population, the Irish population, so much so that by the time of 1014, they're not even really Vikings anymore. There's not a whole lot of Viking blood left in them, but they're definitely not Irish either. They're their own distinct thing, which we would call Hiberno-Norse. Literally meaning Irish Vikings. Also a mouthful, something I'm never going to say again on this tour. I'm going to keep calling them Vikings regardless, but from here on in, anytime I say Vikings, think Hiberno-Norse. That's actually what I mean. But it's very important that we call them that as well, because it shows they never go anywhere. Even up until the last 20 or so years, Ireland's history would have been taught as Clontarf being the defining moment when the Vikings are kicked out of this island, and that never happens. Even though they lose at Clontarf, they hold on to those towns, they hold on to those 5 areas, and they do so right up until the next parts of the tour, as we're going to see in a moment.
Over here, this is a Viking ship, a long ship. So it doesn't have like the swirl on here, so it doesn't, it's just quite straight edged. And then that's the body of the ship. And here's like a, I think it's just a staff room. It's here, but I'm not too sure. And then, see, we're in the, so I'm going to go in this wee hut now. It's a blacksmith's area. You see, you have the, I'm not entirely sure what that is, but it's the fan, the flames, make it hotter. And then you have a cage up there for prisoners. Or maybe if the Vikings would feel a little bit of acidic, you put some in there for bad crack. You know. This here looks like it could be a sauna, or it could be a longhouse. Because the saunas originate in Scandinavia. Let's exit this direction now.
Conquest of Ireland we're talking about here now. We start off with absolutely nothing to do with the Normans, we'll come to them later. We start off our story now in 1160s Ireland. This is a good, it's well over 100 years after the Battle of Clontarf. The Vikings have well and truly been defeated at this point, but again, they haven't gone anywhere. They still live in this island, they still hold on to those 5 towns that we mentioned earlier. They do so from the background now at this point. It's more Irish kingdoms in control now. There's about 28 kingdoms that make up, 28 individual kingdoms that make up the island of Ireland as we know it is today. And amongst them, Leinster would be considered one of the most powerful. And their king, Dermot MacMurrough, he's going to be our main character in this story. Now, we're going to see a lot throughout this story that Dermot is not a particularly good ruler, he's not a good king, and he's not a very nice person either. And the very first thing he does in this story really shows us that. As at the beginning now, our story begins with Dermot setting off to kidnap a woman named Dervla. Dermot kidnapping Dervla. Now, Dervla is no ordinary woman. She happens to be the wife of Tiernan O'Rourke, the king of Breffni, modern day Sligo. And I stress here now, kidnapping, because when she leaves with all of her clothes, all of her jewellery, all of her servants follow across, all of the furniture that she owns is moved, and all the cattle in her large cattle herd is moved as well. So as kidnappings go, this is not a kidnapping, this has been planned. Dervla wants to go back with Dermot. And this is going to enrage Tiernan. He's going to want to have something done about this. Unfortunately for him, there are laws in Ireland at this time. It's not a lawless island. Everyone follows the Brehon law, which is a set of rules that govern basically every aspect of Irish society. If you can think of a crime, the Brehon laws will tell you how you're meant to punish someone if they commit it. And handily here now in this part of our story, they have a passage telling us what you do if the wife of a king is kidnapped. It's a common enough occurrence, I suppose, in medieval Ireland. That passage states that the victim in all this, they need to be paid compensation or a dowry because of all of it. And to modern audiences, the victim in all this, that would be Dervla. Regardless of whether she did or didn't want to go, she's been kidnapped, she's the one that needs to be paid. But this book now, the Brehon Laws, it's not written by medieval audience, or it's not written by modern audiences, it's written by medieval ones. And according to them, they don't think the victim would be the wife. They think the victim in all this is the husband, as it's his wife that's been kidnapped. Yes. They almost view it as his property has been taken now. He should be paid backwards. And for whatever reason, Dermot decides not to pay this dowry. He thinks he's too good. He thinks he's above the law. He's not going to pay Tiernan. And this is going to enrage Tiernan to the point where he brings Breffni, his own kingdom, to war with Leinster Dermots. And Breffni on its own is not strong enough to beat Leinster, but Tiernan is very well connected. He has friends in high places, including in the highest positions of all. He counts Rory O'Connor, the High King of Ireland and King of Connacht as well, as his best friend. And Rory is not going to want to see Tiernan wronged like this. He's going to want to see justice for his friend. So he enters the war as well. He easily defeats Leinster's forces, and as punishment, he has Dermot exiled. They kick him out of Ireland. They don't care where he goes as long as he never comes back. Staying with Dermot, he heads across the Irish Sea into what was then called the Anglo-Norman Kingdom, England as we know it as today. And while there, he decides that he's not really going to accept this exile. He is definitely going to come back, and he's not going to come back alone. He's going to look to bring a force of these Anglo-Normans who are hosting him back into Ireland with him, with the ultimate aim of just winning back Leinster. But unknowingly to Dermot at the time, when he does this, when he invites these Normans in, he's going to set in motion events that are going to prove to be much larger than he could have ever foreseen. The next 800 or so years of revolutionary violence that this island sees, it all starts with Dermot McMurrough being a sore loser essentially, thinking he's above the law and that he doesn't have to conform to society. But Anglo-Normans, who are these guys? Where do they come from? What do they want? Are they actually going to help Dermot in all this? Well, if you'll just follow me up this way here, we'll do a little bit of a crash.
This is paying homage to the lost town of Carrick. So, for over 100 years, the town of Carrick thrived, and in 1307 there were over 100 houses here. So the structures would have been supported a wide range of businesses and trading, including metalwork, leather tanning, pottery, making wool, spinning and weaving, etc. It feels good telling stories, but it's sort of too much information. I started to take on, and wasn't following, so I just decided just to venture on forward by myself. Well, that's a ground tower over there. There's an entrance over here. Oh, there's some birds here. Let's go check it out. Here's some artwork here. Flag here. See it? There's two cards here. Maggie and Major. There's Norman, a hawk. So you can zoom in, see this here. Bella and Luxie. Straight at Cara. So, There's one there. Hello. See, over here. He's not good with the bars in the way, fortunately. Let's give it a shot. He's never getting upset, so I won't keep too long. Right in here. That's actually a mascot. Looks very old and wise, doesn't it? And then we have one over here. A sunbird. That's also Floki. That's a red kite. Looks very aggressive looking, doesn't it? Well, I can't look around being locked in the cage. See? Try to get a good image in. It's hard to do. So then we have Stanley, a striated character. So and I see a Barbie here. This here section here is just the entrance here. And then this is a wee bird sanctuary. Clara, you can see the name up here. It's the last town. There's our journey. We have a wee outro of going down the Viking route, but all was quite enjoyable, and I learned a lot. I think I learned about too much. In fact, just overload the story time, but yeah, overall it's pretty good. I really enjoyed it. People here are well informed of their history, and it's pretty good. The only criticism I do have was the story time at the end was too much. It was absolutely too much. I think it should be bullet pointed. Do here, so we have like the face of Vikings came in their ships over here. That's replica of one of the ships over there, and the huts that we had. Because they actually started here permanently, that's just a more permanent construction of what they will have. There's separate Vikings. There's Vikings that came and pillaged and took the riches, and the woman came back to their land, Scandinavia. But there's Vikings who stayed, like because of old population issues in Scandinavia, so they came here and decided to build permanent structures, as you can see right here, as the picture right over here. So that's about it. See you next one.